Hey there! Welcome to the Influential Christian Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Francine Sinclair. I've been around the block in the entrepreneurial world, creating and repurposing social media content for experts and CEOs. I know firsthand how it can feel lonely, especially when you're mixing your Christian faith into your business life. So I figured, why should we go it alone? Who said that faith and business can't mix? And that's where this podcast comes in. Join me as we meet influential Christian entrepreneurs who are showing us how to blend business and faith in a way that works. We're here to prove that you can express your faith without compromising your business success. On the Influential Christian Entrepreneur, you're not just listening, you're part of the gang. So let's start this journey together. Welcome to the Influential Christian Entrepreneur Podcast, where we uncover the inspiring stories and strategies of successful Christian entrepreneurs. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of meeting and talking to Brian Sanders, who is a social entrepreneur he's helped start hundreds of missional enterprises, including churches, nonprofits, and businesses all over the world. Most notably, Brian is the founder and former executive director of the Underground Network, an international coalition of mission-driven communities, creating ecosystems of faith, creativity, and empowered social enterprise. He's based in Tampa, and the Underground Network is also based in Tampa, and now has movement hubs in 17 cities and 7 countries. Most recently, Brian has been working as a specialist in collective impact alliances for the National Christian Foundation. Brian holds degrees in communication, religion, and applied theology. He is also the author of 6 books, and Brian and his wife, Monica, have 6 children, 4 adults, and 2 still living at home. They have just returned to Tampa after living and working for the last 2 years in Dublin, Ireland. And he is the first person that lives in the same city that I do. It is so nice to have you here, Brian. Nice having you here. So, Brian, that's quite an impressive resume. So I can't wait to dig in.
It's so wearying to listen to it all. It's like, oh, too much.
It's long. A lot. 6 books. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's written 6 books. And it looks like you are really, really into, I guess, what we call your walk of faith, because most of the things that you have done are really related to the Christian faith. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about, like, you and I have never met before. Like, literally, this is the first time we meet. I would like to know a little bit more about your background. Where are you from originally, and your family, and just your early life, if that's possible, and how you became a Christian.
Yeah, I think that's sweet and meaningful to ask about, our origin, I guess. I'm from Florida. I'm like a 7th generation Floridian. So,
wow.
And actually from this kind of Central Florida, Tampa Bay area. I grew up in St. Petersburg. I came to faith. My parents had kind of a tumultuous relationship, as many of us, I'm sure, have that mm-hmm. story. And I think at one point I was maybe 11, 12, and my mom just told my dad to leave. And so I felt like maybe I needed to be the man of the house, and I wasn't sure what that meant or how to do. But something inside me thought, oh, you should go to church, like a good person goes to church, a good man goes to church or something. So I'd ride my bike to this little Presbyterian church. I'd sit in the back, no idea what was going on. Me and the old ladies in the back. But of course, there was a youth minister there. That Presbyterian church had a church partnership with a parachurch ministry called Young Life. And so they would see me back there, and eventually, made their way to get to know me, invited me to things. And I actually became a Christian at a Young Life camp. I guess I was maybe 14, something like that. And it was, I think when you have a broken childhood, when you have a kind of broken family, you feel a little bit worthless. There's probably some a calculus that goes on inside the mind, and to believe that God would know you or care about you or love you and of course forgive you, but I think for me, that sense of worthiness of being seen, of God wanting a relationship with me, was just completely revolutionary, and it hooked my heart in a way that's never really let go. And probably college. So I went to University of Florida at first, my undergrad. That was probably where I maybe emerged as a missionary person, which is probably my core identity of all the things I do, entrepreneur, business, mission, consulting, whatever. I still kind of just feel like a missionary. It's probably how I mostly define myself. And even my writing and stuff, it's more missiology. But so, yeah, I mean, that led me on a journey to take a position with a parachurch organization called InterVarsity to work on college campuses to plant all throughout the state of Florida. And so I'm a little bit of a pioneer in that apostolic gifting, which is the sort of Christian equivalent to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Starting things essentially 0 to 1. That's my world. I get bored quick after that. And then really the underground, starting the underground in 2006, 2007, founding that with a group of about 50 people. I'd say that's also kind of this entrepreneurial thing, the belief that every committed Christian person is called somewhere into the mission of God, and that we ought to sort of create, the church ought to be a platform that serves that calling somehow, that both empowers, honors, recognizes, helps to hear, and then resources that individual calling. And so the underground, just that it is an experiment in that, like, could you create a church form that was meant to empower people in their calling? So yeah, I did that for quite a while, and now on to other things. But that was a long answer to your sorry, Brantley.
I found it really interesting because I see that free thinking type of nonconformist entrepreneurial spirit in what you're talking about, the underground network, because, a micro church, I think if I have the right idea, and I've watched a few videos, is that you spur or you create or help people create micro churches. But what is a micro church? Could you explain that? Because people in the audience probably don't even know I know what a mega church is.
Sure. Yeah. That's easier.
Know what a micro church is.
Fine. Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, okay. So everybody in their mind and their conception has what you could call, like in business, we would call it a minimum viable product. Like, what is the very smallest core unit of what it is that you offer, So what is the minimum viable product for the church, or what we would call the ecclesial minimum? What is, so if I asked you, do you have to have, pews to be a church? You'd say no. And I'd say, well, do you have to have a building to be a church? It's like, no, probably not. Like, do you have to have, it gets harder. Like, do you have to have leaders to be a church? Do you have to have sacraments to be a church? Do you have to have money to be a church? And all of us have a different answer to this question. Like, what is the actual minimum that it takes to say, okay, well, you could be more than that, but if you were these things, you'd say you're looking at the church. And so for us, it just becomes very simple, like worship. So like submission to Jesus as Lord, community, real relationship, deep relationships with other people who believe in Jesus. And then some sense of mission, like a called and sent into the world to expand the boundaries of the kingdom in some way. So we said, if you're looking at a group of people that are like in submission and worship to Jesus, in deep community with each other, and have a mission to see the kingdom come, you're looking at the church.
Right.
So that to us is the ecclesial minimum. And so what we thought is just like, there's a lot of things out there that are not, we don't call church, but it is that.
Right.
It actually is. So we would say you're looking at the church. And so how do we give it a new name or something, define it? Some people have called these things missional communities, simple church, house church. But to us,
house church. That makes sense to me.
Of course, that's very fixed, right? It's like, okay, so it's church that meets in a house, but that's not what we mean. We mean any expression of those three things, any group of people doing anything, whether it's in a laundromat or a football court or a business or or on the street or under a tree or in a home or, you know, in a sports league or in a law firm or like anywhere. The church can
Anywhere.
be anywhere if we recognize it in its smallest form. So it's not to say it's better or more important than
Right.
conventional legacy forms of church or whatever, but to us it's like that's legitimate, and we ought to find a way to say yes to it and to recognize the people then that lead those things are leading a church.
Right.
So that's the other issue is like, I don't know, identity and credibility in leadership. We've probably maybe the bar is too low on some of those things. And we should say, look, that's what you're doing is really important. And there ought to be some level of honor and expectation and integrity that goes into leading those things. So really, it's just like if once you see the world that way, Francine, once you think, okay, all these little things that we might call outreaches or communities or whatever, if you see that, if you think, well, that's actually the church, then you'd probably have to reshape how you interact with them, what it means to lead, what do you do with funding, you know, what kind of coaching structures do you create, what kind of governance do you create, how do you deal with theology, all that stuff changes.
Right.
If you realize, okay, a group of, say, I mean, you know, let's just, I'll just imagine the average church, 250 people. I'm probably, if I look out at that group, I'm probably looking at 30 churches potentially that are there.
Right.
And so if you reimagine that group of people as 30 microchurches, you'd have to do some things differently. You'd have to imagine leadership differently. You'd have to spread the money out differently. So that's really the underground as an experiment, is how to do that once you accept this form of the church and how to commit yourself to it, to its healthiness, to its nurture, whatever.
Yeah. So it's a completely different structure. Our traditional churches are very structured. And I guess not everybody jives with that structure and those rigid parameters, but they do have a lot of fire inside and they want to do things. They don't want to like have to talk to so and so who has to talk to the other person and go through that hierarchy to do something that they have a real passion for. I can see that. And so, you know, because you also have on the other side, really churches, traditional churches, and many, I mean, I visited so many churches trying to find a church. It took me, honestly, 3 years, where you just have a lot of churches that there's no life in them. Okay. And that's, I don't mean to criticize. I'm just saying you don't feel excited about going there. You don't feel excited about going back. There's just no life. You know, and so what a great way to have an alternative, because at the end of the day, the main goal is to, you know, spread the gospel and participate in the Great Commission, right? And do what Jesus tells us. It doesn't matter. So we all have the same purpose, which is the way I say it is to glorify God. How we do that can be different depending on your skills, your abilities, your passions, right?
I mean, I think that word participation is really important. You know, maybe, you know, one could make the argument that when there is a lifelessness within a church community, it's probably to do with a lack of participation. I mean, even the leaders of those kind of forms of church would say, "Why don't my people do more?" or whatever. But I'll give you like a metaphor for this. So, 1969, a woman called Kitty Genovese was brutally murdered, stabbed to death, something like 34 times in a neighborhood in Brooklyn. And why this is important and why it became a matter for observation and research is that some 34 people, I think, witnessed the crime, and nobody called the police, nobody intervened, nobody said anything. They just stood back and watched. So an article came out in the New York Times, I think that later that week, about this event. And two social scientists in particular keyed on something which came to be known as the bystander effect, which is essentially what happens to us when we watch something but don't engage. And they came up with this idea, this construct of the diffusion of responsibility. Yes. So essentially, the more of us there are watching something, the less we feel responsible to do anything about it, right?
Right.
So this is what happens if 100 people are watching some crime. We just think, well, it's not. I mean, I shouldn't do anything. Like, I'll just probably mess it up or something. Whereas if one person witnesses a crime, they feel a consolidation of responsibility. So they feel like if I don't do something, no one will. And that bystander effect is not. It's inadvertent. It's not like anyone meant to do this in the church.
Right.
But essentially, the social contract in the church is come and watch. The church is a spectacle. It's something that you look at. And participation is to sit quietly and let somebody else talk or let somebody else perform,
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it accidentally creates this bystander effect with people in the church, and it creates a diffusion of responsibility. So instead of feeling like if I don't do something, no one will, we feel, I mean, look at all these people. And plus the professionals are up there and they're fine and they're doing it.
Somebody's going to do something.
Surely somebody will help the city or solve these homeless problems or whatever. And I think that's the difference between, it's not like microchurch is some secret key, sauce or something. It's just a way of saying all of us, where do we feel deep responsibility and where do we feel God pressing us and like seeing something like where I work, for example. If I don't do this, no one will. Like to bear witness to a need and to feel a kind of burning inside you, like I should probably do something about this. And that is the opposite of spectacle. It's the opposite of the bystander effect. It's like, I better do something. And then can we create like church structures or just support really that helps people recognize that and then, backs them somehow. Because they say, well, I should probably do something about this, but I don't know how. And we were just talking about this before we started recording, like you find yourself like alone. Like where are there any Christians here? Does anybody know how to do this? Am I really the only option here?
Yeah.
Because what do I know how to do this? So a little bit of support, a little bit of help, but to recognize that God, that's exactly what God does. He's always sends, he scatters, he's a sending God. Jesus is the revelation, the incarnation of Jesus, a revelation of sending primarily as a modus operandi for mission. So he sends us into places where there's nobody but us or just a few people and then wants to use us. And I think that little churches can emerge in businesses and little churches can emerge in neighborhoods and little churches can emerge in third spaces and city centers and those kind of things. And that to me is like exciting and beautiful, but also it is a kind of solution to what you're saying about like a lifelessness or a deadness.
Yes.
Because if people aren't actively engaged, aren't actively participating, of course they're going to be bored.
Yeah. And if Christians, we're not alive and we are not excited, how are we going to bring other people to Christ?
Great point. Yeah. Like, come in here and just be bored with me. I mean, that's not.
I mean, yeah, that's why people don't want to go to church.
Right.
I didn't want to go to church before I became I thought I was a Christian, which I was wrong. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to go to church because all the images I had of church are just religion. Mm. I came from, just rituals, just being bored. And I think that we can make a big impact with with the micro churches because you are dealing more one-on-one with people. There's a closer relationship. Not to say that you can't do that in a larger church. Every church is different. I actually go to a mega church now. I never thought in my life I would go to a mega church because I was like, no, that's too huge. But the way things are done there is it's almost like a micro church. The center is huge. And so I wanted to know how do you support these micro churches? Do you provide funds, the underground network? Do you provide the funds? How do you vet people? What's the process there?
Well, it's a work in progress. I mean, it's about almost 16 years old, something like that now. I think it was learning how to create the right kind of structures, the right kind of systems to support that sort of network. Essentially, the church as a network. And it's funny because we use the term mega church, but the truth is, with my eyes, if I looked at it in the system approach that I would take, I would think actually this is what you're looking at is not one mega church. You're looking at dozens, if not hundreds, of microchurches. That's actually what comprises. Now, it may be
Mm-hmm.
one brand, it may be
Mm-hmm.
one set of leadership team or something. That's fine.
Yeah.
But there's all this enterprise that'll be
Yeah.
going within that community, which is
Mm-hmm.
actually beautiful. And if they're doing a good job, they're probably rewarding and empowering those little enterprises that are happening all throughout the community. So I think for us, it came down to a series of departments, platforms, financial services. So if you're going to start something small, what do you do? How do you do with money? Can there be an umbrella that does a 1090 for you that handles accounting and a bank
Mm-hmm.
account, tax receipting and all that stuff. So first thing, free financial services to any of our microchurches. Number two, training. So there's just stuff we don't know how to do. And it's not across the board, everyone, but there's like a sort of portfolio of general training that most of us need, whether that's biblical, theological,
Mm-hmm.
practical, communication, whether it's leadership, whether it's fundraising. There's kind of a set portfolio of things that leaders need. So that's a department. Coaching. Everybody needs individualized inquiry-based coaching to say, how's it going? What do you need? Where are you struggling? What do you think the answers to that are? Like someone to help you process things that's been down the block, whatever. Facilities. So we were one of the first kind of entities to create co-working spaces, like open environments where you had shared economy. So no microchurch can afford a facility.
Right.
You can't afford a conference room. They can't afford a banquet hall. They can't afford those things, right? So could we share? Could we consolidate and have a few hundred people? I mean, the genius of sharing is like, at its height, the underground would have, say, 200 microchurches. 200 microchurches, and we get one copier lease, right? Let's say we pay $700 a month for that really high-end copier that 200 ministries can share. So that's a lot of money saved if you think about it. Like, let's just say 50 of them had to get a copier. That's a lot of kingdom money gone just because we don't share.
Right.
Because we're not capable of saying, let's all just use the same copier, So stuff like that, I'm really moved by the efficiency of that kind of sharing. So facilities, coaching, training, financial services, media services. So most little ministries would need like a website or a logo or those kinds of things to be able to create that. And those, essentially what the underground did is create a platform of services for those guys. So they're the end game. It's not trying to get them to go to something or do something.
Right.
But what they're doing is the goal. And so just create a series of like really talented department teams that can come in and make them better.
And so then you train them how to raise funds for their microchurch.
Yeah. And we were grant making. So we also, the underground has traditionally given away close to half the money it raises. So we'll raise a bunch of money, use it for operations, which all goes to serve them.
Right.
And also be a grant making entity. So to be able to give little micro grants to all those guys, so that even $500 or $2,000 or something can make a difference when you're starting something small in a neighborhood and you just don't have money, especially if you're working with the poor or with marginalized people. A little money can go a long way. So, so that was also part of it. That kind of grant making.
And so you have Cohatch, which is your co-working space enterprise. Is that only for your microchurches, or is that also something that you rent out to entrepreneurs and startups?
No, so Cohatch is a totally different enterprise. So basically in 2017, I just felt like it was time to let a younger executive team run the underground. I'm getting a little older, Francine. So I just thought the underground should always be led by, and we just have some really amazing people. So I just thought I should get out of their hair. And this is part of why I went to Europe, was to live and work in Europe, partly because we had a bunch of sister movements there that I could help, but also just to get out of the hair of my young executive team that was replacing me. And so that, to watch out for that founder syndrome thing. So when I came back from Ireland, I was like, well, now what am I going to do? Because basically this beautiful, amazing team is running the underground great. So So I took two jobs. One with the National Christian Foundation, working on cause collaboration. So getting people who are working on the same causes
Mm-hmm.
to kind of work together on strategy and
Mm-hmm.
to help fund them based
Mm-hmm.
on collaborative work, what's called collective impact.
Okay.
And then the other thing was this beautiful, amazing co-working company out of Columbus, Ohio. And I met these guys and they were raising capital to bring Cohatch into Florida. And I just thought, this is good. And part of the reason why is because the underground always had a co-working component, but it's really hard to sustain because it's expensive and
Mm-hmm.
microchurches are poor. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you can't, it's not a great revenue stream. But anyway, these guys found a way to capitalize it to run profitable business, but also had a heart for impact. So they really wanted to give away scholarship memberships to nonprofits and
Mm-hmm.
startups. And
Mm-hmm.
that really got me interested. So I thought, I want to help these guys come into Florida. So I took a role with them as market leader for Florida and trying to help them open a bunch of locations here, partly because it's a beautiful product and because they want to create ecosystems themselves. And that's also what I'm interested in. I'm interested in creating places where people share ideas and relationship. This is the way I think business is done in the 21st century. It's less about transaction. It's more about relationship, and it's more about networks and nodes and networks. That's how you sort of make it. You'll understand this because you're so savvy in the kind of online virtual space. That's all about networks and relationships. It's economy of scale. It's network effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we do that on Main Street, on like the down, street level business stuff? Cohatch is an example of how to do that. So I love them. I'm committed to them. And that's a part of what I do now for a living. And what's cool, integrating my worlds, is that the underground, so we're building a Cohatch in West Tampa, and the underground office now will go into a Cohatch. So
Oh, really?
they
Wow.
do all their officing, their staff, and all those platform of services I described can now find a home in a really professional grade, well-run, beautifully designed co-working space. Because our stuff is always a little bit, clubhouse. We you piece it together with the money you have.
That's amazing. So then you are going to continue to work with Cohatch, but you still have your hands in Underground Network. You're still helping and you're still doing whatever you can. And so what is your goal, or what is the goal with Underground Network? Is it, do they want to continue to grow? Where are you guys headed in the next few
Yeah, I
years?
mean, I still sit on the board with them, and I'm deeply, deeply committed to their leaders. And but I'm a part of a microchurch myself, and I do my part. I still think I think maybe, and you might know this too, Francine. I think that probably business itself, the world of business, is the next kind of missional frontier, the next great missional frontier, to figure out how to
Yes.
how to plant the church in business, and
Right.
so
Billy
I'm really,
Graham said it years ago that the next frontier or something was going to be the marketplace. And someone told me a statistic that eight to 10 times more conversions happen in the marketplace than at church. So,
well, we keep trying to, we've always, I mean, the missionary dilemma is we always try to pull people away from their life to come to something we're doing. That's kind of a tractional thing.
yeah,
But really, what a missionary understands is that the best way to reach people is to go where they are, to be in their world, in
to
their
be where
life.
they are.
Like I have a friend named Stephen Barr, who you should interview, by the way. A friend named Stephen Barr, who started something called Cast Member Church. And Cast Member Church is, cast member is what they call Disney employees, right? They call them cast members. And I don't know the number exactly. I want to say it's 80,000 people or something that are employees of Disney. So they live in that kind of like West Orlando, Lake Buena Vista
Yeah.
area. So Stephen was like, worked for Disney, was a musician, did all this stuff. He thought, well, I want to plant a church in Disney. I want to plant churches for Disney employees. Now think about that, Francine. That's close to 100,000 people that no church planter identifies as a city or as a geography to plant a church. He's, to my knowledge, the first person that's ever done that. And so he just thought, he just walks those parks. He knows all those employees. He that's his world, and he's trying to reach those people. Well, look, if you thought I want to reach people. If you think Google, for example, like when I lived in Dublin, there's like 6,000 people that work for Google right there on the docks on the seaside of Dublin. And I think, okay, there's like 6,000 Google employees. If I want to reach them, if I want to plant microchurches there, what would I do? Well, the first thing I would do is get a job there.
Right.
Like be an employee, have an actual badge. How weird is it to be like, what are you going to do? Stand outside and be like, hey,
right.
Google employees, come to, I'm starting a church for Google people. It's like the first and most obvious thing to do is to work there.
Right.
Is to be one of them. Right? That's incarnation, to take on the flesh of the people that you're trying to reach. So we're already there. We already work everywhere. Christians already are everywhere.
We are.
We're in all these jobs. We're in all these positions. In some cases, we run the companies.
Yeah, many times.
So why can't we see if we see ourselves as missionary? This goes back to that diffusion of responsibility. If I feel like, well, I'm responsible for reaching these 70 employees here or something. And you're absolutely right. Of course, that's going to be more effective. That's where we live. That's who we are. That's our everyday relationships with people. We can be there for them in hard times. We can show them who we really are. We can reveal what holiness looks like or integrity or whatever. Incredible. But as long as we keep thinking we got to get people out of their business and come over to a place that's religious, I think we're going to have less effective. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that might be helpful for some people to kind of find Jesus in this totally other environment. But yeah, I'm with you.
That's going to be rare, though, for you to pull, especially somebody who's an unbeliever,
100%.
Pull them out of the marketplace to take them to church, but, we've been told by society that we got to keep business and what they call religion, for me is faith, it's separate because it's going to offend people, because it's not professional, because we need to keep that as a personal side of our life and not bring it in. Yeah. And we've done a really good job at obeying what the world has told us to do. But it's not what Jesus told us to do, is it, Brian? I mean, you know more than me. I'm a rookie at this. You're a pro.
Well,
and so tell me, why is it that we Christians are so just happy to obey and comply with that, mandate from the world about keeping our faith out of our business?
I saw a statistic recently that 47% of millennials, Christian millennials, think that it's morally wrong to share their faith. So that's profoundly problematic. So not only will they not do it, but they actually think you shouldn't do it.
Right.
And that's probably similar to this dynamic you're identifying with business. Like you really shouldn't do that. It's unprofessional, to talk about Jesus in a professional context. And offensive to other people of other faiths or other beliefs. Exactly. So, part of it is on us. I mean, I think part of it we have to own. Like maybe when we have shared our faith, we have done it in a way that is offensive or is obtuse. It stands out. It's like, that's not helping. It's not helping us get along, or it's not helping us work together or whatever. But I also think in a kind of postmodern world where the proposition in a kind of postmodern intellectual economy is, your truth is your truth and your ideas are yours, and no one should, deny your own view of reality or whatever. Okay. So maybe I don't agree with that in a metaphysical sense, but I think, okay, if those are the terms, then don't I have a right to believe something? I mean, so do you, so do I, but where we're free in that economy is to tell our stories and to talk freely about who we are. So, like, for example, if I hire someone now, it's important that I say, listen, you don't have to hold any particular religious point of view to work for me or to work for us. This is totally open hiring practice. You don't have to, you can believe whatever you want. Now, you need to be kind and respectful and so on. I'm not, but there is no expectation for you to believe anything you want, or you can believe anything you want. But I joke, I'm like, you should probably Google me, because I am very Christian. So I need you to be okay with that. And I
Mm.
want to make sure you're comfortable working with someone who's like this because I'm not going to hide who I am, just like I don't want you to hide who you are. So what the sort of like equity and inclusion, what that can look like in a religious sense is you need to be free to be who you are. And I welcome you as the full person that you are. But you should also welcome me. And so if I want to talk about Jesus or the Bible or say I'm going to pray about something, or that can't be off limits. And I want everyone to know, if that makes you uncomfortable or gives you the heebie-jeebies or something, maybe this isn't the job for you. Now, I'm still going to be cool and respectful. And it's always going to be friendship and dialogue. And really, I think the whole game, Francine, is loving people. Like if you just actually care about people, they'll know that.
Right.
But again, why should we have to tuck in our belief, but then other people are allowed to? We actually legally have to let people believe what they believe.
Right.
Okay.
And express it.
Yeah, but then so should we be able to do the same thing. So we should be free to be like, yeah, I'm Christian. You don't have to be Christian, but this is why I'm a Christian, or this is why I'm so in love with Jesus, or honestly, why I see dignity in you. Part of why I think you're amazing is because of the image of God in you. That's just my worldview. That's how I see the world. I think God created us. I think that there's a loving God who knows you intimately, who made you. Anyway, so it's just, I think you're right. It's a proposition that we accept when we don't have to. And I think obviously there's ways we can mess that up. There's ways we can go too far. There's ways we can be insensitive or unkind.
Right.
But I think at its core, we have a right to be who we are.
Right. And you brought up a really good point, which is what I always tell people. When you talk about your story, your personal testimony, and it's not just the time when you came to Christ, you have a personal story about how Christ has worked in your life every day, as long as you're breathing. Yep. When you share your personal story from the first person, nobody can come back at you for that, right? And that's an excellent way for us Christians to share that message, incorporate the gospel. The inappropriate way might be like, you are going to hell, kind of like pointing fingers at other people. But when you're talking about your experience, and I think that that's what maybe we need to come to realize, that you don't necessarily have to be out on the corner with a sign saying, whatever, go to Jesus now, or you're going to burn in hell, which is actually true, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to be out on the street corner. You don't have to condemn other people, but you can talk about your personal experience, whether you're talking in person to someone or you are posting on social media as yourself. Mm-hmm. And that is how I came to Christ. Had it not been for, I don't even know who they were or who the person was. I can't remember. They don't know me. Yeah. Had it not been because I saw someone talk about how Christ, which was a completely different Christ than what I thought I knew. I was like, who is this Jesus they're talking about? Like I never knew all this other stuff. That's how we can really create an impact. And in today's, like, for example, I work in the online marketplace. People don't just talk about business. They have personal brands, right? Where they talk about business, but they talk about their lives, their children, what they eat, what they drink. You can incorporate all of that, and you can spread the gospel by sharing your personal stories and how Christ has worked in your life. And I think more of us need to be talking about that. And that's how we can mix our faith in our business and not let society tell us we're not supposed to spread the gospel because it's going to offend other people. So
yeah, and honestly, I don't think it's Jesus in the end that is the offensive thing. I think probably where we've gone wrong, it's down to two things in my mind. One is, what Edmund Friedman would call a non-anxious presence. Are we comfortable with ourselves? Are we comfortable in our own skin? So if I talk about Jesus or my faith, I'm not blushing or nervous or something, because I think it's beautiful and true. and a grace to tell you about it. So I'm not a bully, so I'm not interested in like, you better do XYZ. I just want to share it with you in the same way I would share a story I heard, or a little piece of research that I think might encourage you, or something in a performance review or something. Like I'm not anxious about it. So part of it is, if the more anxiety we feel about trying to, I got to preach to this person or something, just the worse it is, the more difficult it is to hear, right, the more nervous you make people, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that non-anxious presence is huge. And then second is just actually loving people. I mean, I don't know how you'd feel about this, but my challenge to anyone listening would be not to actually share Jesus with anyone you don't feel affection for. That step one is actually to ask God for a heart of love for that person. So coworkers, people who are under you, over you, peers to you, to actually slowly over time just look over at that person and think, what an amazing human being, and God really loves that person. Like, to be dialed in to, like, they're not perfect. Of course they're flawed, but there's people are fascinating, and there's things about every person to feel compassion towards, to feel warmth. And when that's there, when you're like, God, I just really like you. I just wish, I want the best for you.
Yeah.
And then you talk about Jesus, and you're not an anxious person. That's usually going to go okay. Even if you don't say everything right, or they'll feel loved by you. They'll feel like this person really cares about me. So to me, that's enough. Like, love people and talk about Jesus. That's it.
Right. And talk about him. And one thing we also have to remember, and something that takes a lot of pressure off, is that it is not your job to convert somebody. Your job can be to plant a seed. And when we share about Jesus, or we share about how he has worked in life, we are planting seeds. It is up to the Holy Spirit to convict people and bring. That's what totally happened to me. Trust me, because, and so I think it's a lot of fear. It's fear of man, fear of what other people have to say about us. It's fear about having that stress about, I need to convert people, when you actually don't.
Right.
And not knowing exactly how to say it. And another thing, especially that is, I see in men, especially the more successful they are, I find that they don't want to look like, if they're not completely confident in all that they know everything about the Bible, they don't want to, they're so used to being successful and being the smartest guy in the room. They don't want to look stupid by not somebody challenging them on something and them not knowing how to respond when or maybe they feel guilt or whatever. So there are many reasons, but my advice to people is to be in the Word. If you're in the Word every day, I think that's what's going to give you what you need, the tools that you need. Prayer and being in the Word is what's going to give you the strength, the courage, conviction to be more bold for Jesus. And just know that we're in a broken world, and there are a lot of broken people out there, And so, like you say, be loving. That's, I think, one of the most important things. Love is the most important thing. So, Brian.
The background, for everything we say. It's like, what makes a thing good news? Like, I don't know how to express to someone the good news of Jesus until I know them, until I know what their bad news is, because look, the gospel is a panacea. It's a theory of everything. It's so much more than you can say in one sentence, or what you can say in one conversation. So, really, Spirit-led evangelism is about hearing a person, deeply hearing a person, and understanding something about that place of great emptiness or need inside of them, and suddenly realizing, clicking, Jesus fills that. Jesus is the answer to that. But how can I give that amazing news to them if I have not heard them to know what that particular thing is? Because I honestly believe for each of us, that good news is a little different. It's the same person answering. It's the same person delivering. Yeah. But because he's so complete, he's so multifaceted, and the good news, what does it mean? What Jesus accomplished on the cross for you and me is so vast that how would I possibly sum it up in one conversation or two or 10? Unless I've heard you so deeply that I hear that place of hurt or emptiness or brokenness or sin or guilt or whatever, and I say, you know what, this is how Jesus touches that, meets that. Mm-hmm. So what makes that effective thing is like listening, actually. That's like 80% of it, 90%, I don't know. It's a lot of that relationship is about listening and love, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Brian, how can someone reach you if they wanted to know more about the Underground Network? I mean, I'm assuming you're not the main person to contact because you've kind of stepped out, but you're still on the board. How could people reach you, or they want to know more about Cohatch or even the National Christian Foundation? What is the best way to contact you?
Man, if you're interested in the Underground, just undergroundnetwork.org, I guess, is probably the way to go, or tampaunderground.com. Those are places to go if you're local. If you're interested in cohatch.com, you know, we're building locations all over the country, and it's a beautiful thing. If you're interested in collaboration, my little kind of collaboration company is called Blue Aspen. BlueAspenGroup.com, I think, is also an option. And if you want to know more about some of the things we sort of touched on, I do have a number of books. Microchurches, A Smaller Way, Underground Church is also out there. Just Amazon. You can see lots of things I've written out there. So
under Brian Sanders.
Yeah, if you just search my name, I guess my name plus church, microchurch. I don't know. You probably find it anyway.
Oh, so you don't have like your own website, briansanders.com?
No, that's a bit much for me. So, yeah.
What about LinkedIn? They can find you on LinkedIn, right? You're active there.
I'm on social media. I'm not great at social media, but I'm out there. That's how we found each other.
Yeah. I found you on social media because I'm always on social media. God has put me a little bit away from that lately since I'm going to Bible school. I haven't been able to be so active, but that's how I found you. So you guys heard it. Probably the best way to find him would be LinkedIn, which I'll put a link to his profile on the notes of the show. And I wanted to say thank you, Brian, so much for being so generous with your time. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in again. I hope that this interview, there was something that you were able to hold on to. You got something out of it. And just know that, you know, Jesus loves you, and that, you know, we are here. If you're a Christian, you know, part of what we're supposed to do is to spread that love to other people. If you're curious and you're kind of thinking about Christianity, hey, you know, our doors are always wide open. You can reach me at hello@francineSinclair.com, whether it's because you probably want more information. You don't know what version of the Bible, or maybe you just have a basic question. You can find me also on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I'm always active there. And we'll be back next Tuesday with another interesting interview. I want to bless all of you. Thank you so much, Brian. And you take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Brian.
Bye.
If you're a Christian business leader or executive, I invite you to work with me to create a faith-driven personal brand on LinkedIn that will empower you to navigate the intersection between faith and business. Feel free to contact me directly at hello@francineSinclair.com. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening today. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, and don't forget to follow me, Francine Sinclair, on Facebook or LinkedIn. See you next week for a new episode.